Yo, what is up, guys? Snap here. Today we're going to be talking about everything Affliction. Basically, how did all the builds go? How much money did we make? Would we do anything different? All that good stuff. And maybe some pieces of advice for those of you that are going to be continuing to play the league. So first off, after the 7-day long push for our 9-man team, we made a total of 29 mirrors and 2,756 divines and some extra bubblegum in there, as well as 17 Hinakora's locks that we bought. We further broke this down into the splits here, which you can see here. We have 11 mirrors, 17 locks, and all of these divines for the 3 traders that we had. And then we had an equal split for all of the mappers, which is broken down here. Here's a quick post from one of our traders that just kind of breaks down the price that we bought all of the mirrors at. So if you're interested in seeing kind of like how the prices of early mirrors can go, just take a look at this. Additionally, this is all of the T0s that we found over the course of the week. Now, we don't show every single T0 on our filter. We weren't looting Bloodseekers or Divinarius. So for the big uniques, we found 4 Headhunters, 1 Mage Blood, 2 Squires, 2 Rings of Kalandra. Those are all the expensive ones. We also found a couple of the other ones as well, but for the expensive ones, they're all up here at the top. Our good friend Emporium Gaming here made a pretty good tweet that kind of breaks down just like all the stuff that we got here. Also has some extra information, including like the time we farmed. I'll link to this tweet as well if you're interested in that in the description. Anyways, let us move on to the builds. We had a new carry this league, which was going to be the Raised Spectre Necromancer, so there's a lot to talk about with this build. Overall, initial impressions of the carry is that it performed way better than expected because of Hydras. If you just take a quick look at any of our mapping sessions, you can kind of see how much coverage the Hydras have here and how high the damage is when they do the barrage ability. This Spectre pretty much carried the damage of the build, and honestly, with the current difficulty of the league mechanic, if we didn't have access to such a powerful Spectre such as the Hydras, we probably wouldn't be playing this carry in the current state of the game. The damage requirement you need in these super high juice maps in 6-man is astronomical. And to be quite honest, the Kyrie's Watch or the Redemption Sentry's damage doesn't really cut it. The trade-off, of course, going Nebulous is just going to be the -8 quant and 30 rarity from Winterper. And honestly, being able to clear the map more comfortably is going to be better in the long run. With all that being said, the Hydras are super powerful, the DPS is super high, and I could see how some of these Hydra setups could compete with Nebulous damage in its current state. But obviously, if we see next league, the Hydras don't really go core, then this build is obviously going to get a lot weaker, and if Affliction also goes core, your damage requirement is going to skyrocket, and so I would shy away from the Spectres and just maybe go back to a Nebulous carry. You heard me talk about it pre-league. The reason we thought we could get away with Spectres is because the content, which was deli boxes, was just so easy. That with the addition of Ghosts, it didn't make the map too hard. But yeah, we're gonna have to see what they do with the Spectres long term if we want to keep it in our build. But yeah, if the Hydras get canned, we're probably also going to be abandoning this build. So anyways, what are some of the changes we saw from the POB and what did we actually land on when we were playing in game? First thing you might notice on the tree is that we dropped the large passive here. That last large cluster jewel was just a little bit too expensive and a little bit too hard to craft, and you can get the leech back from just another mastery here. So probably just drop that last cluster jewel and grab the minion leech here. The higher end option is, of course, to add that last cluster jewel in the slot over here. It's just a little bit more expensive of an option, so we opted out of it. With the leftover points, we did get a little bit of spell suppression on the carry. We didn't originally plan to have this suppression wheel, but the damage we were taking in Affliction was just so astronomical. Tried to squeeze in a little bit more defenses on this character than we originally planned for. I do think that going life-based with the Defiance of Destiny might be a better route, knowing how cheap and available that amulet is. You do have to make some other pieces of gear, like going +2 boots, but I think going a life-based version on this character is probably a better idea with the existence and abundance of Defiance of Destiny. That item is just too broken not to use, and I think going CI was maybe a mistake from us. We had to do it again in the future with our current knowledge. I would definitely just plan to go life-based just because how broken Defiance of Destiny is and how much it can save you in a lot of those mechanics that just shotgun you. You don't know the lead mechanic spawns a bunch of extra projectiles, and the amount of shotgunning and overlapping that the mobs can do on you is very high, and Defiance of Destiny is a very good defensive layer for that kind of damage, which is mostly the thing that you're dying to. The other thing, of course, being player mistakes, and then also turboing when you don't have control. Both of these kind of deaths can be prevented with Defiance of Destiny. The only thing that Defiance doesn't really help you with is super strong DD hits. But honestly, any character is going to die to that, so definitely go Defiance if you have the opportunity. The build wouldn't change that much if you wanted to go life-based. You'd probably take this life wheel here. You probably wouldn't come down to this bottom section with all the ES. You grab the life here, you grab the life here, and then you might consider coming down to Scion life if you have some extra points. You're probably going to be sitting at like 3.5k life if you have good life on gear. The only problem you might be having is with sustain. However, I do think if you build in a little recoup, particularly with this wheel down here and this wheel right here, you'll have more than enough, especially if you get a little bit on your rings, to feel fine in a bunch of maps that have no regen. But that is one concern. Other changes here is that we managed to get one of the new alt gems, which was the Summon Skeletons. We moved off the Arcanist brand setup for Desecrate and the Offering, and we just started doing it manually, mainly because we wanted to fit in a little bit more single target in the form of some skeletons here on the weapon. And the reason you need this is just your single target damage requirement is just so high once again with the Lee mechanic because the mobs are so tanky. And so we were actually just pushing Vol Summon Skeletons on like the map boss and just kind of praying that we didn't hit the anger aura. But having the single target there definitely sped up like the map boss. It's definitely worth killing. It also helped for stuff like expeditions when the mobs are particularly tanky. So having the Vol Summon Skeletons in there just to try and get the damage requirement under control in some certain situations is definitely something worth jamming in there. Those are kind of the two main pivots here that we changed from the original build. Other than that, I think the build performed as expected, if not better, mainly because of Hydra. I'll definitely be leaning towards this kind of a setup in the current league. I think it performs super well. One last thing to mention here is for the charms. We just decided to go for gain max mana as ES. This character doesn't have a super great pool alone. With Discipline on, it goes to 4k. Anyways, moving on to the Aurabot here. Now, the Aurabot didn't have a ton change from the original scheduled POB. Mainly, we saw that mana reservation efficiency rolls on the charms here, and so that is just a bunch of extra efficiency that you can get on your tree. Now, of course, that just means that you can skimp out on other pieces of gear on the build. You don't need as much reservation efficiency as you need, and I actually found that I could drop an entire cluster down here. And I just put the extra points into some suppression that I wouldn't normally be getting, as well as I took both mana wheels here just for some extra quality of life on casting my Blessing, which is in the boost, and it's casting a level 33 Hatred. Other than that, this build is exactly as we POB'd it. It performed exactly as expected. There aren't too many changes. If you are wanting to get more expensive charms and you want to invest a little bit more, I don't think it's too unreasonable to go CI very easily in this league. I think it's pretty much doable with just one Voices up here and like another small. And then you get some RMR charms and you could probably pretty easily go CI and fit all the auras you need in. Voices were just super expensive when I was looking at them. I already had all my gear together, and so I just kind of CBA changing my build. But I think going CI is definitely super smart this league just because of how available the efficiency is down here on the charms. Next up, it's going to be the Cursebot here. As for the Cursebot, we made two main changes here from the planned POBs that were pre-league. We ended up dropping this large cluster over here. We just find that Cursebot is a little bit too point starved and can put some other stuff on like masteries to fit in that last cluster. It also struggles a little bit with its personal ES pool, so we just ended up dropping the large down here. Additionally, one other thing we changed here is we dropped the Eye of Malice for an extra power charge on the helmet. This gives us an additional curse. We found that the Eye of Malice was too hard to get the mobs to negative resistances, and even with the exposure flask up and everything and all of the pen that we have on the Cursebot, we still sometimes could not get the boss's resistance negative to multiply it with Eye of Malice. So we just ended up taking it off, getting a +1 max power charge helmet so it had an extra curse, and that way we can curse Despair, which the minions have chaos damage via Unholy Might, so it's a little bit of extra damage here. Other than that, it's your standard run-of-the-mill Cursebot. One other thing that we started doing this league, which was pretty much new, was going to be the Arcanist brand setup. I think the full Arcanist brand setup performs really well on the Cursebot. It has a lot more coverage than the standard Vixen's Embrace self-casting that we were doing for a little bit, and so I think we're all aboard the Arcanist brand Cursebot technology. So this is definitely something that you can do in the future, is just keep this Arcanist brand tech, and it gives you a lot more coverage in the long run. Last thing to mention here on the Cursebot is this is yet again another build that you can convert to life-based and use Defiance of Destiny to increase the survivability of this character. This character, as with a lot of these other CI builds, can unspec all of the ES, access a bunch of life nodes, which is here, here, and up here, change all of the gear to be life instead of ES, and then slap on a Defiance of Destiny, and your survivability and tankiness has just skyrocketed. The carry is a candidate, and also the Cursebot is a candidate. And it's a super easy switch just to change out some of the gear and some of the passive points. And with the price of Defiance, I also highly recommend looking into jamming this in on your Cursebot. Last thing to mention here is this build was also on the charms. We opted for obviously Curse Effect, and as a secondary stat, we got if you've cast a spell recently, you have a plus 4% chance to block spell damage. Once again, the damage you take from the Lee mechanic is sky high, and so we are really trying to cap out block and spell block via these secondary mods on the charms. And so he got 3 of these for a total of 12% chance to block spells if you've cast a spell recently. Anyways, moving on to the Mana Guardian here. We made a few changes. Mainly, we didn't go split personalities. We looked at the price of them. They were like 25 divs and just said nope. So we replaced it with just a rare jewel and then also a second Might of the Meek here instead of another split personality. Additionally, we never got our hands on a good timeless jewel here, but we managed to get the new That Which Was Taken jewel, which gives us another 8 spell block here. Additionally, we got some effective mines and some extra res to help with alter and Ellie weakness overcap. The reason for the mine effect is we were having our Mana Guardian throw a 2-link, which was a icicle mine of sabotage here. This helps cap out the crit of the minions here. It has 60 or 80% crit chance or something like that for enemies near it up to a max of 500%. And it's super easy to hit the cap, even on somebody that doesn't have any aura effect really, if you just link it to an enhance here. So this is something that is definitely worth doing on the Mana Guardian or really anybody else on your party, but we found it easy just to fit on the Mana Guardian here. Additionally, you can take the shock wheel up here to get increases and reductions to max mana, also apply to shock effect. And then that way, if something is super tanky, you can throw a Vol lightning trap at it and instantly hit the shock cap, and this helps deal with really tanky rares. So this is definitely some utility you should be jamming it on your Mana Guardian. Other than that, the build isn't super complicated. Just put on an Aegis, get a fuck ton of mana, and give your team immortality in return. Also, make sure to hit the link button. This ability right here, Soul Link, best ability in the entire game. It is probably the single strongest thing you can do in a party is to link everybody, make them take way less damage. It is 100% noticeable when this is on and off. And so link up time is definitely super important as well. All right, moving on to the Culler. Now, we did make a few changes here. The reason for that is because we have the new Adorned jewel. The Adorned increases the effect of magic jewels for ones that are not socketed in cluster jewels. And now you can actually get more rarity on the Culler by unequipping all of the voices that we used to have here and then pathing all the way around and getting a bunch of blue jewels with rarity on it. Now, ideally, all of these have synth rarity on them. We just were not able to get our hands on them. But this pathing over voices, just getting a bunch of these small jewels over here, worked out to be a lot better than just going voices. As for our tincture choice, obviously you want a culling rarity tincture. This is probably best in slot for a Culler. It means you don't need to be in Kingmaker range to actually have culling all the time. It's super nice quality of life, and then also the rarity, of course, because you're just trying to juice a bunch of rarity. Super easy trade-off here. You can squeeze in a bit more rarity if you take the next Enduring Suffusion, notable here on the Ascendancy, which gives you 75% of your tinctures per empty flask slot. However, the only flask you have left to drop is your Life Flask or an Amethyst Flask. And being chaos capped or even 49 chaos res here is kind of important. There's a lot of chaos damage, especially in the Lee mechanic. And then obviously dropping your Life Flask might not be the best idea. But if you're going for the rarity, you can choose to drop this. The only thing I might say is that you could probably drop a cluster jewel for a anti-venom cluster, get chaos capped that way, and then drop the Amethyst Flask here for an extra 75% effect of the tincture. You'll probably get a little bit more rarity that way, but honestly, it doesn't really matter either way. I think you're just kind of buying extra gear for just like maybe an extra 2 or 3% rarity or something like that. And so we just didn't really bother. Our Culler was sitting at over 1,000 rarity this league due to the new Adorn jewel. So going the Adorn route, super recommended as well. That is most of what we have to say about the Culler. Anyways, let's move on to the Ghostbuster here. There isn't a ton to speak about on this build. The Ghostbuster performed about as expected. Basically, Defiance was like a 1 or 2 div item, which was nice to see, or not nice to see. I think this unique should be a T0. And then we got a Progenesis, and then basically he was unkillable. You get Progenesis, Pet Blood, Defiance. You can just run around with like no other items equipped, and basically your character's done. Past that, get a bunch of movement speed, run around, ghost the map. It's super straightforward. And yeah, this build performed about as expected. One thing we did is we actually had him take some extra mine nodes here so that he can throw Stormblast mines with increased effect. Some of the rares just get obscenely tanky from the Lee mechanic, and so having different people with mine setups that they can throw to apply the buffs or the debuffs helps with your single target tremendously, because as soon as you encounter an unkillable rare, everybody can just throw down their mines. The Mana Guardian can throw down his trap for max shock, Aurabot can hit Vol Haste, and then your damage just triples or even quadruples. Having this pocket utility, super worth it. Just spend a couple points so you can enable your Stormblast Mine. And then you buy the T-Gem, which is the Stormblast Mine of Sabotage, I believe, to hit the cap easier. Super easy to do. Definitely worth putting into your build as well. That about wraps up all the builds. I think most of them performed up to expectation. And I think the carry actually exceeded expectations with the Hydra. But we'll have to see if they keep these corpses going on to future leagues. I think if they keep the Hydra stuff, this will probably be a mainstay for our builds going forward. I think the quality of life of just having passive minions is super nice. And while this build does need a little bit more money to get off the ground, I do see us refining it over time and maybe coming up with some cheaper setups that we can run early. And we'll be optimizing it more and more every league, and I'm sure it'll get to the point where it might become a little bit cheaper than Nebulous to put together at the beginning. But yeah, we're just gonna have to wait to see if the Hydra corpses go core. That's like kind of the main thing we're looking out for. Anyways, that's it for the build. We're gonna talk a little bit now about the league mechanic itself. If you aren't aware, Affliction is the strongest league mechanic that has ever been added to Path of Exile. And I mean that in all facets. Damage, damage taken, the tankiness of the mobs, the loot, everything about this mechanic is the highest tuned thing I have ever seen in all of my years of gaming this video game. If you missed the clip here, we dropped something like 75 raw divines from a single rare. We have like, I don't know, 80 exalts or something like that, a bunch of annulments, and we didn't even have room to pick it all up because look at the screen. There's just shit everywhere. It's just like insane. My inventory is already full. The thing that's particularly problematic in the league mechanic is the blue juice. The blue juice gives you currency items, and it feels like Nemesis 3 of old days, but it feels like it's on steroids or crack cocaine. It feels like it's Nemesis 12 or some shit, because every single mob you kill, even the white mobs, just shit out currency, and it's just so obscene. The yellow and purple ones feel a lot more balanced in that it's multiplying the stuff you're already putting on the map. It feels quite powerful. Maybe it's a little much, especially if they want to bring this mechanic core, but honestly, I think that the blue juice, if they ever want to bring this mechanic core, needs a total full rework. Overall thoughts about the league mechanic minus the overpowered blue juice would be, I enjoy it a lot. I think it provides a lot of risk reward for the league mechanic. I still think that the damage you take is just astronomical and way too high, probably a little bit overtuned in its current state. I do expect some more nerfs to come to the mechanic in terms of damage and damage taken in the coming weeks. But overall, I like the league mechanic gameplay loop itself. Finding all the wisps is super satisfying. Getting the balls to, reveal the extra zones. It's just a super satisfying league mechanic, especially when it high rolls. It feels really good. There's just some clear balancing issues that exist with the numbers and the blue juice as well. One thing I can mention here is that you can see me running around and scouting the edges. If you're in a party, you can do some pretty cool tech where you can sprint into the edge to scout zones. And then if you see something in the fog, you can temporal rift backwards and do a lot more scouting than you're able to do solo. You can also walk to the edge of zones and scout them for the person who's doing the revealing, and it's super easy to see the trails if you're able to get right up to the edge without burning your reveal meter down. And so there are some advantages to doing this in a party. And I do think that the meta we're going to see eventually is going to be to have a 900 movement speed character that can sprint into the fog at light speed to scout as many events as possible, and then temporal rift backwards, that way giving you the maximum chance to find the events inside of each map, because that's what gives you the most juice, is actually revealing the events and clearing them. I think we might see a meta similar to Ghostbusting last league, where you have a second character host the map for you with 900 movement speed, and then you can do the affliction mechanic on that character because you can scout it so well with temporal rift specifically. So your main account hosts the map, and you have an alt account that has 900 movement speed that doesn't burn his reveal, sprint into the black fog and try to scout as much knowledge for you as possible, collecting balls to reveal more areas and refresh your bar. And because of how OP the league mechanic is, I definitely do think people will take their time and go out of their way to do this strat, even though it seems so cumbersome, because honestly, this league mechanic is the most rewarding thing they've ever put in the game, and I cannot stress that enough. But yeah, TLDR, I do hope it goes core. I think the player power that it provides through the charms and stuff is probably a bit much. The mechanic itself, I do enjoy a lot, however. But if they do want to bring it core, blue needs to get fucking yeeted, deleted. And the yellow-purple probably needs some toning down as well. It probably is just a little bit too much juice for the power it gives you. But honestly, if you have to burn a scarab slot and maybe invest a little bit on the tree, it might be a little bit more balanced. And maybe I feel that way just because, it happens on every single map, and we have ghosting and boxes and Affliction all multiplying together. If we would have to drop one of those mechanics to, fit in Affliction, maybe it would be a little bit more balanced, but I think regardless, Blue Juice needs to get fucking deleted. Anyways, let's move on to some mapping stats that we got here. So all the stats I'm taking here is from our mapping days on Burial Chamber, which began on Monday and then concluded on Thursday evening. I'll link to this down in the description as well if you want to take a look at all of the stats and, all of the time we did in the map. But basically, we ran a total of 174 Burial Chambers and we dropped a total of 48 Doctors in that time. These include the full bricks where we walk into the map and our carry dies immediately due to a zone transition out of the Affliction. And so this is with no bricks removed. If we do some guesswork to all of the maps that we ran a total of 19 bricks and around 60 half bricks. And a lot of these are due to disconnects in the party where one person might DC, and let's say it's the Mana Guardian, and that causes somebody else to die. But we completed maybe like half or maybe 3/4 of the map. And so this is our best guess at how many total full bricks and total half bricks that we ran in the entire week. We had a total of 96 flawless completions, which is about 50%. So it was a rough league for deaths and crashes. There were a fair amount of our deaths that were due to player error and that kind of thing, but additionally there were a lot of crashes. This is probably the worst yet for crashes to desktop in history. We've had problems before with routing and disconnects and that kind of thing, but the raw number of crashes to desktop this league is bar none the worst it has ever been in POE. I don't really know what they did. I don't know if it's the performance, the caching. I have no idea what they did, but it's really, really bad. We can take a ballpark based off of our average map time completion, the amount of effective maps we completed, which is basically like how many maps, if we fully completed it, that we completed, just to kind of extrapolate our card drop rate here a little bit. So if we look at our per effective completions, going to be about 0.36 Doctors per effective completion. So about, 1 in every 3 maps was a Doctor in that ballpark. Additionally, we counted fortunes, but only for the last day. But we got a pretty good sample size for it, and we were dropping around 35 fortunates per effective completion of the map. We had an average map time of 12 minutes and 13 seconds, and the total time we spent in maps was 2,125 minutes, which equated to 35 hours only in the Burial Chambers, meaning we had a 1.35 Doctors per hour as a group. You take the value currently of Doctors as well as fortunates, the amount of div card value we were extracting out of every single map was 13.43 divs per map. This is honestly very high and is honestly all attributable to just the league mechanic. Here I flipped over to our Trial of the Ancestors Mapwatch, and the total amount of div card value we extracted out of Cemetery inside a Total League was 4 divs. We're well over triple that on Burial Chambers at 13.43. Part of that is due to Doctor plus Fortunate is just a super strong combo, but also we're just dropping way more ground loot than ever before, and that's just because Affliction is once again the strongest thing they've ever added to the game. There is one last thing to talk about here, and that is going to be our Atlas. So basically, we dropped all of the ultimatum chants. It is just dog shit. And so it turned into a standard Wandering Path, Unending Nightmare, Top Hat, Tree. Basically, just Wandering Path, grab all the top nodes, grab all the quant nodes, grab the ghost nodes and the keystone. And then from there, you can jam in Expedition, a bunch of Expedition spawn chance, which is up here, as well as down here. And then from there, a little bit of Abyss chance, which is here, here, and here. And then you can throw on a little bit extra on top, which comes in the form of Legion spawn chance, which is here, here, and here. It's super cookie cutter. I do think that ghosting is going to be the best strategy for larger parties, and the reason for that is going to be the number of league mechanics that you can do per hour. When you are doing abysses, your map time sometimes nearly doubles, and while the abyss maps are juicier on average, you are getting less lever pulls on the slot machine, which is the league mechanic, because you are increasing your map time. And so I do think the efficient thing to do is to do a faster strategy in the form of ghost busting, because the maps are faster. That way you get more pulls of the slot machine for those super high roll Affliction maps where you get 10, 11k juice. And in those super high roll maps, you're walking out of the map with maybe 30 to 50 divines and just T1 uniques and raw divs. I'll be linking this Atlas also in the description. So if you need the Atlas, I'll be linking it down there as well. well. But anyways, yeah, what a crazy fucking league, right? We got 30 mirrors, 3,000 divines on top of that. I don't think we'll be seeing anything like this ever again in the near future. Maybe GGG has gone off their rocker, but we'll see. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, you want to leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer as many people as I can. Also want to thank all the people that were hanging out on my Twitch stream. Super fun league. Love all you guys. Yeah, once again, we'll see you guys next time. And I'm Snap, and thanks for watching.